Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Great to see so many people here this afternoon. My name is Nina Parson, and I'm the Principal Occupational Psychologist here at Insight Workplace Health, and I specialise in supporting neurodiverse individuals in the workplace and also their organisations. So a big welcome from me. We're hosting this webinar today as part of Neurodiversity Celebration Week. And I'm going to be sharing with you ways in which neurodivergent employees can be supported at work. Live captions is available. If you click on the three dots at the top where it says more, and then what you can do is go to language and speech and then be able to show live captions. So if you want to implement that, please go ahead and do so. Okay, so this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available for a few months after the presentation today. So things that we're going to be covering today is what is neurodiversity and some of the strengths and also some challenges that individuals face in the workplace, and that kind of gives you some context around why you might, if you're neurodivergent yourself, why you might be experiencing particular challenges, and if you work with or you manage someone who's neurodiverse, again, this gives you an understanding about why there are some of those challenges that they're experiencing in the workplace. And they will then we'll move on to talk about supporting neurodivergent individuals in the workplace and what you can possibly consider and think about in terms of, the way that the organisation and the environment is designed, and some ideas of how you can support further. Do feel free to put questions in the chat, and hopefully there'll be some time at the end so that we can go through and address those. Also happy to take verbal questions at the end as well. So thank you for that. So when we talk about neurodiversity, what do we mean by that? Well, it refers to natural variations in the human brain functioning, and it is a concept of neurological differences which are the result of normal natural variations in the human genome. So there's been a real shift in that perspective in the last 30 years, whereas previously it's always been seen as very much about a medical model of curing someone who was considered, who had a neurodevelopmental disorder, to now working in terms of a biopsychosocial model, seeing as about adapting the environment in which they are living and working. So initially, neurodiversity was associated with the autistic community in the 1990s, but now includes other neurodevelopmental conditions as well, and that includes ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and some people also include other conditions such as Tourette's or broader brain differences, for example, brain injury or mental health. But primarily, when we're talking about neurodiversity, we are focusing on these neurodevelopmental conditions that are listed here. And they are conditions that you start to notice from childhood onwards, okay? So what we know, as I said, awareness has grown over the last 10 years, and challenges are being picked up sooner in children, such as they might be noticing delays in reaching developmental milestones, observing progress in their education. So as a result of all of this growing awareness, there's more training that's going on in education settings as well. And so that's enabling a number of children to be picked up sooner, so that interventions can be put in place sooner and support them going forward in their education. But obviously, how these conditions manifest differs hugely between individuals, but these early experiences and the level of support available during education can have a huge influence on not just life choices, but career paths and job roles. So it's really important to remember that people's experiences of being neurodivergent will vary hugely when you also then consider not just educational experiences, but also the intersectionality of gender, race, culture, class, and even religion. They all play a part in an individual's self-perception and their identity, and also how other people are perceiving them. So it's a very nuanced area. There's lots of research that's going on in this field. There's lots of things that we're still learning, and it's very much a field that's developing, and that's what makes it so exciting. But underlying all that are human beings, and what we're trying to do today is also recognise and celebrate the strengths that they bring as well. So one thing that you should know is that often you might find that there are two people you know that might have one of these conditions, but we know that not all two people are going to be the same in terms of their experiences or the opportunities or challenges that they face daily. So what we do know is that, well, you're probably aware yourself that there have been lots of media articles and discussions around sort of an increase in the number of people identifying as neurodivergent, and estimates suggest around 10% of people in the UK are thought to have dyslexia, and about 3 to 4% of the adult population in the UK are thought to have ADHD. And in terms of autism, NHS England data from 2024 is suggesting that there is a 1.32% of people in England are thought to be on the autistic spectrum. Now that's interesting because you'll see a lot of people quoting a 1% figure, but this figure represents data from NHS England, which has been collated in 2024. And then dyscalculia, we think around 6% of people. That's probably less well known, and that's around challenges with numeracy, understanding numerical estimations of numbers, quantity, and mathematical facts and rules. And then motor coordination challenge associated with dyspraxia. Again, we think around 5% of people in the UK are thought to have DCD, dyspraxia. Developmental coordination disorder is what it's otherwise known as. So if you total all of those individuals, you're probably looking at approximately 10.5 to 14 million people in the UK. That's huge. And if you also consider that often these conditions co-occur, so the number is possibly greater. And the chances are that either you are or you know someone who has a neurodevelopmental condition. You might not realize you know someone, but they probably are working with you, studying with you, shopping in the supermarket at the same time as you. You will be coming across individuals who are neurodiverse pretty much, I would say, at least every day or every week through your course of interactions. So I think one of the key things to kind of recognize is that having a diagnosis, having one of these labels can really empower someone to understand themselves better, as it provides a framework so that they can advocate for themselves. It gives them a vocabulary to explain why they might be having challenges or why they're particularly good at something that they can do, like very creative in the bright brains or very good at problem solving. And it really emphasizes, you know, that they've got that way of explaining what's going on for them. But we know that there are long wait times to get an official diagnosis for many people. And so as a result, what we are now seeing is that a lot more people are self-identifying, and that's okay. And in a workplace, that's okay as well, because it should be noted that under the Equality Act, they may well be protected irrespective of whether they have a formal diagnosis or not, because it's not about having a label to be protected under the Equality Act. If you've got a persistent challenge that is long-term and has a substantial impact on your day-to-day work, then that is likely to be protected. Just to be aware of that. In terms of then going forward, as I mentioned, you may see people that have more than one of these conditions, but it's also to understand and recognise that we see a lot of strengths in people who are neurodiverse. And as I've mentioned before, experiences can be very different. And what I do know through my experience of working in this field for 16 years now is that I see many neurodivergent individuals who've had incredibly successful careers, and they don't need any support at work, or they've created and crafted roles that fit their style of working really well. And there are many successful entrepreneurs who identify as neurodivergent. Those strengths in creativity, that tenacity, that drive, often we see those kind of qualities in people who are neurodiverse, and they flourish and they do really, really well. So speaking about strengths, more and more organisations are recognising the strengths and capabilities that neurodivergent people can bring to work, and which can make them very successful in their roles. And a number of strengths that have been observed within the population include good long-term memory, creative thinking, as I mentioned, great problem solvers, good at detail orientation, great in-depth knowledge and being subject matter experts, good people skills as well, and the ability to be maybe flexible and multitask and be resilient. So as you can see, there's a number of strengths that individuals have. Not everyone is going to have all of these strengths, and we see different strengths in different individuals, but this gives you a sort of an idea of the kind of things that often are identified in people who are neurodiverse. So as well as the strengths, as I did mention, sometimes some individuals, although they can go on and flourish and be really great at what they do, there are other people that can really have some challenges that they can experience at work. And they can struggle. And what I've often observed is that often it's down to the design of the workspace, the systems in place, the usability of technology or in-house systems, and even the culture in which they're working in, or maybe a mismatch of skills and different interpretations of expectations, because often there can be some communication breakdowns and misunderstandings. And also a lack of understanding and awareness that some people need to approach work differently. And I think that's a key thing to kind of remember as we go into this presentation a bit more. So I'm just going to talk you through some of the key areas of challenge and why we might see these occur at work. So what we know is that a number of challenges that neurodivergent people can experience at work are linked to the management system of the brain, the control center, which is responsible for executive functioning and helps control and regulate thoughts, emotions, and behavior. And most, but not entirely, located in this frontal lobe of the brain, just here. And they are important for day-to-day life activities and carrying out those functions. So some of the core functions are working memory. So that's holding on to information and keeping it in your mind in the short term. So for example, remembering a set of instructions that your manager has told you to go through, or writing down a telephone number whilst you're trying to hold those numbers in your head long enough so that you can write it down. That's an example of being able to use your working memory well. We often know that this can be challenging for people who are neurodiverse. Also, there's cognitive flexible thinking, and that's the ability to adapt to changes and shift perspectives very quickly, and deal with change very quickly, and be able to pivot if something unexpected happens. And we know again that this is an area that can be challenging, for example, with people who are autistic. And then there's self-control or emotional regulation. And this again is about regulating thoughts and actions, such as managing impulse control, ignoring distractions that are going on around you, and managing emotions. And again, we often see that this can be an area of challenge for people who perhaps have ADHD. But all of us are using our executive functioning every day to perform activities in work. And they can include things like planning and organizing, sequencing, prioritizing, initiating tasks without procrastinating, completing tasks on time, problem solving, being able to sustain attention and your focus to finish that piece of work, and managing your time effectively, and just monitoring and adjusting your actions and performance, recognizing that you have to do that in order to finish a piece of work. And what we know is that people who are neurodiverse often have challenges in these specific areas. And this can cause issues with carrying out particular activities at work. And one thing that we know is that obviously that can be quite stressful if they're not performing as expected. And often they can't help it. It's not because they're being lazy, it's because of the way that their brain is functioning. But and then if they're not allowed to do things in a particular way that works well for them, and there's a certain procedure that you have to follow because that's the way that we've always done it here at this organization, then there are going to be sort of situations that occur where there's going to start to be clashes, and potentially that can lead to stressful situations. It can lead to anxiety, and it can impact people's self-esteem and confidence because they know that they probably can do it. They just need to do it in a different way, or they might need some additional support. But if that's not readily available, then often what happens is that we see people that get to a point where they go on they go on sick leave. They're absent for a long space of time. Sadly, some people can experience burnout, and often ultimately they might leave the company, and they could be an incredibly talented individual who has a huge amount of knowledge and experience, but the setting in how they were working hadn't really been adapted to support their needs. And that's a potential waste and loss of great talent. So again, it's how do we try and manage that better? And I just wanted to share with you some comments that people have shared with me that you might have heard. For example, I struggle to remember everything covered in the meeting. I constantly switching between tasks. Is there somebody might want to go on mute, I think. I can hear someone chatting away in the background. Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to find them to mute them, but I can't. There's too many people.
So you might otherwise hear people say things like, I've missed that deadline again. Constantly switching between tasks is really overwhelming. I've got too many things on my plate to do at one time. I don't know where to start. You might hear people say, I just can't keep up with writing notes in the meeting. You might hear them saying, I don't know what to prioritize. The noise is so distracting in the office. I'm struggling to concentrate. I think I might have just experienced that myself. I have difficulty planning and organizing, and also, it can take me longer to complete my work. It's not that I can't do the work, it's just taking me a little bit longer. So these are sort of things that we often can hear when we do things like a workplace needs assessment, and we're trying to understand what's going wrong for that person at work, or where their challenges are, and what we can do to advise them to get the support that they need. But obviously the impact will be different depending on the job role, whether they work alone or in a team or as a manager. And also there's a cumulative effect. If you have multiple challenges that are impacting day-to-day functioning and capability, then that's all going to be amplified. So what might start off as one small issue can very easily get out of hand if it's not supported soon and quickly. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed or anxious, then all of that can be exacerbated if you're having these sorts of challenges. So in terms of executive functioning, I think you can probably see there where, you can see how the brain is perhaps, if there's a weakness in executive functioning areas, then this is going to impact on how they're performing in work. And this is an example of real life experiences of what people have actually shared with me when I've seen them in an appointment. Okay. So I think one of the other key things to bear in mind, it's not just all about executive functioning. We know other aspects of neurodiversity include sensory sensitivities, and often the work environment can exacerbate sensory sensitivities. And what we know, I did a review of our own data that we collate from our workplace needs assessments, and I found that 49% of employees reported sensory sensitivities with bright lights in the office, whether it was headaches, struggling to concentrate, unable to adapt the lighting to suit their needs. And then 74% of employees reported sensory sensitivities around noise distractions in the office. So as you can see, this is still a persistent challenge that we often come across when we're seeing employees, to find ways to support them. But there are solutions out there to support sensory sensitivities, focusing on these two that I've highlighted today. And it could be something very easy and simple, like installing some acoustic panels on desks to help to absorb some of the noise. You've got sound absorbing work pods where people can sit, which you can get those that are enclosed as well, so they're really soundproofed, which is great if you're trying to focus and concentrate. It's all about control of the lighting. So again, is it possible to put in place dimmable lamps, or being able to control the overhead lighting in some way? Exposure to natural light is often important. If people might prefer to have the blinds down if they are sensitive to bright lights, even sunlight. Other people might prefer to work closer to natural light as opposed to artificial light. So again, having a conversation around that can be really helpful. And of course, the old favorite, noise cancelling headphones, still very popular and very helpful if you're working in an open plan office. But I think what we're really trying to achieve with all of this is that we're trying to create environments where daily tasks are lighter. We're removing the cognitive load and frustration and trying to minimize those challenges by enabling positive outcomes for people at work. And when I was thinking about how I was going to describe some of this today in this presentation, I felt that perhaps kind of thinking about the universal design and the 7 principles that go alongside your universal design might be a good way of kind of approaching it today. So when we're thinking about how to support neurodivergent colleagues in work, it's worth considering it in the terms of these principles, because universal design actually refers to creating environments, systems and processes that are usable for all people, irrespective of whether they have a disability or not. And I think that's a great place to start. That's a really positive way to start. But often, we're not starting from scratch in organizations. There are systems and processes and cultures that are already embedded. But I think it's good to have, to think about universal design in the way that you're approaching and supporting neurodiverse individuals. And, because we know that these principles will help you to create a work experience which can support a wide range of cognitive, sensory and even communication differences, which are often seen as barriers for people who are neurodiverse. And that often comes because there could be unclear expectations, there's a lack of clear guidance, there's hidden rules and expectations are vague communication, and even potentially even cognitive biases. So thinking about equitable use, by making systems available at work and offering different ways to access the same information, you're avoiding segregating users and you're making this design more appealing and easy to use. And I've got an example of that, and that's ReachDeck. It's a digital accessibility tool that provides website users with a choice in how they engage with that content on that website. It features things like read aloud, so that it can read the text to you on the screen. It can convert online content to an MP3 file so that you can listen to it on any device. What's on that website. It also enables you to access information in different formats, and it gives you you can change the font size, you can make the page clearer to read. So there's lots of things that you can do to make it more accessible for different people. And in this case, something like this would be brilliant for somebody who had dyslexia, for example, where they can utilize text to speech software so they can hear rather than reading the page where they may make mistakes or struggle with some of the words. Thinking about flexibility, flexible working arrangements are something that work really well for people who are neurodiverse, allowing employees to choose where, when, and how they work. We know that flexible hours, being able to adjust start and finish times, can align well with people in terms of understanding where their peak focus time is, giving people flexibility about where they work, whether it's in a hybrid way, remote, having a quiet zone available in the office. Again, having flexibility and choices available can make a huge difference. Thinking about time of day, and recognizing perhaps that energy management, attention, focus can fluctuate. Some people have really good focus first thing in the morning, others it's in the afternoon after lunch. And again, thinking about when someone's working at their best and utilizing that time for when they're doing particularly concentrated work. And thinking again about technology, what can you do to support different working styles? And a lot of digital tools can really help with that. And ensuring that those tools are easily accessible and they're intuitive. And that also helps to support different cognitive ways of thinking and sensory needs. And ensuring processes are easy to navigate with clear guidance is also really key. And there's lots of examples there of ways that can be put in place in organizations. Using a lot of assistive technology can be a real game changer for people who are neurodiverse at work and in the workplace, and being able to have these tools available to them to make their day-to-day work more accessible for them to perform well. And then ensuring information is shared in ways that everyone can understand using a range of formats. For example, on the DWP website, it's a great example of ensuring content is accessible. And in this example here, the Keep Britain Working report, as you can see here, you can actually access that report in different formats, including sign language, audio. So again, if you struggle to read dense pieces of text, as we know can happen with people who are dyslexic or have a slower processing speed that we know is very common in people who are neurodiverse, again, you're giving them different options to access the same information, including an easy read. So you're enabling it to be accessible for all. And that's a real perfect example there of universal design. And also moving on, talking about, the fact that everyone makes mistakes at work and it can happen. But if you're creating a culture which is supportive and recognizes that we can all make mistakes, and not being admonished for that, and understanding perhaps, well, is there something else going on for this individual? They seem to be making similar mistakes all the time, or they're taking a lot longer. What's going on? And I'm asking those curious questions rather than just assuming that, they're not very good at what they're doing. And the key thing is understanding and then taking away any learning points from that situation, and then trying to build that in and avoid it happening again. Is there something to do with the way that they're being trained? Is it the way that they're accessing information? Is it the process? Could that be looked at and adapted in any way? And building those clear processes, clear guidance can really help to minimize errors. It sounds obvious, but we don't always see it happening in practice. Giving people the space to practice, newly learned skills. We know that neurodiverse individuals can be brilliant at what they do, but sometimes it might just take them a little bit longer to learn it up front. And building in additional time to practice, they could end up being one of your most effective employees. And enabling, again, the use of technology to spot errors quickly, whether it's through literacy software is one way of making sure that you can reduce mistakes in written work. And really the idea is to try and minimize the likelihood of errors and being, understanding and recognizing that there's something else that perhaps is going on and perhaps further help and support is needed. And then thinking about tasks, workstations where people are set up working for the day. Can these be adapted so people can be more comfortable in doing their work? For example, here, this is a height adjustable desk, allowing people to stand rather than being seated all the time. And we know, for example, someone who's got ADHD might want to walk around or pace around, and being able to have a desk that they can put at standing height means that they've got that ability to keep, using up some energy whilst they're working as well. And again, working off two screens, useful because instead of just having one, this helps to support with working across multiple documents, and reducing the load on working memory because they're not holding information while they're flicking through different documents because they've got them all up in front of them. And that can also help minimize distractions of noticing, oh, emails have come in for me, or there's someone trying to get me on Teams chat. So just something simple like having two screens can make a huge difference to how people work. And then thinking about the space in which people work, that environment in which they're working, is it accessible to all? Thinking about, installing clear signage so people who struggle with wayfinding, for example, we know autistic people can have challenges with wayfinding, having quiet zones so that people can go and take themselves off somewhere quiet if they need to decompress or need to go somewhere to focus and concentrate because the office is too noisy. Adapting the lighting, I've mentioned that already, that can make a huge difference by reducing sensory overwhelm. And that again can all lead to small changes, can lead to increases in productivity. And then I think, to end my presentation now, often neurodivergent individuals can feel disabled by the work environment, whether it's the systems, processes, culture, the environment. And what we want to try and do is create environments which accept difference and remove many of those barriers, both physical and psychological. And by providing access to assistive technologies, ergonomic equipment, you are removing some of those barriers and you're giving the opportunity for neurodivergent individuals to show what they can do and to perform at their best. Being able to integrate through building inclusive workplaces and ensuring that you can maybe look to flex and adapt to match the needs of those individuals. Again, it's going to end up with really positive outcomes, and it's likely to also limit absenteeism, limit sickness absence, and also improve performance, and also encourage, and increase retention and overall work satisfaction, which is, what we want to try and achieve here. So, we know that perceptions of neurodiversity have changed over the last 10 years in particular, and with greater awareness of the positives, organisations are creating cultures that recognise the positives and put guidelines in place to support employees to understand neurodiversity. And with that understanding, and by creating a more inclusive culture, this is going to lead to more positive outcomes. And here are just some examples of how that can be done. It's about creating a more collaborative environment, giving people the opportunity to come forward because they feel safe, that it's okay to talk about that they might need additional support at work, putting a training in place, awareness training, and supporting managers, because often we find that a lot of managers need additional support as well to understand how they can best manage and help their colleague. Having neurodiversity champions or even employee resource groups a great incentive to support and raise that awareness within organizations, because it does matter and reputations matter, and being seen as an inclusive employer is going to go a long way, and it's going to attract further talent. And of course, if you need any additional support, we're here to help you as well. And it's quite interesting to see that a CIPD report from 2024 found that 63% of employers who had created neuro-inclusive organisations had seen a positive impact on employee well-being. So it does make a difference, and that's where you want to try and get to. You want to encourage as inclusive environments as possible to allow neurodivergent individuals to really thrive and prove that they can do really well in their roles. In terms of additional support, just to make you aware that here at Insight, we can offer various services to support both individuals who are neurodivergent and also their employers, such as carrying out workplace needs assessments. We also provide ergonomic equipment and assistive technology training so that you know how to use that software properly, so that it can become habit forming. Coaching for the individual to help them produce strategies to help them day to day in their workplace, and also co-coaching to support managers as well, and webinars and training, a bit along the lines of what we've done today, as well as diagnostic and screening services. There's a QR code there, so if you wanted to find out more about what we do, you can go to our website. And because it's Neurodiversity Celebration Week, we wanted to offer you a gift of a 10% discount on our services or on related equipment. So an email will be going out to all attendees. So do keep an eye on your inbox and keep that discount code safe. All right, well, that brings us to the end of my presentation today. So thank you all for listening.